this is something else because I texted you. I wanted to talk about this. And so I wanted to kind of, because this was another thing that I heard you bring up recently, and it's one that particularly frustrates me. And whenever something particularly frustrates me, I'm always like, okay, what? Yeah, and then I got to figure out why exactly. I remember one time back in the day, Glenn Greenwald, this was when he broke the Snowden story, and he went on Lawrence O'Donnell's show. And Lawrence O'Donnell said to him, he was like, Glenn, I've read all your reporting, and honestly, like, I just don't care. Like, I got nothing to hide. Like, I don't care if the government wants to look through my phone. I got nothing to hide. I remember Glenn was talking about it, and he was like, there was something about it that just made me so angry, and I kind of couldn't figure out what it was. And then it dawned on me that it was like, well, yeah, obviously you have nothing to fear, Lawrence O'Donnell. It's only the journalists who do real journalism who have anything to worry about, And there's this dynamic that I see building up on the right, and I will. And again, these are not people who I have anything personally against, but like Matt Walsh, Tim Pool. Tim's been very good to me. I consider him a friend. But they've all kind of taken this line of like, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care what's going on with Israel. Like, why are you guys so obsessed? Why are you so? And there's something so particularly enraging about it. And I think part of it is because I really genuinely believe, like, guys like me and you are like, we'd love to not talk about this.
Right.
That's kind of our whole argument.
Yes.
Our whole argument is that this shouldn't be a thing we even have to talk about. But saying, why are you obsessed with it? It's like in 2006, I'm sitting here and I go, look, I'm a non-interventionist, but why is everyone talking about Iraq? Like, why do you have to? Well, because that's where we're intervening. So, like, how can you sit here and be like, I'm a non-interventionist? Like you're taking the correct policy position from my perspective, so I at least give you credit for that. But the thing is, we are intervening. We are currently being interventionists. And also, like, if your whole thing is like, I want to focus on America, I don't want to go fight other wars, well, who's pulling us into wars?
Right.
It ain't Lebanon, you know what I mean? Like, so like, it just seems like cowardice to me. Like, how do you get, and it does seem like that message is resonating with like some people, as I just think it's profoundly unfair. Like the whole point of all of this is that it is an American destruction of Gaza. This isn't Israel doing it. Netanyahu goes around and brags about what Israel can do. Israel can't do shit. Israel can only do things because they have the full backing of the United States of America. So like, sorry, if you're in the world of talking about these things, you don't get to pass on this one. Like, you got to have an opinion.
Yeah, I saw that too, and it's become very popular over the past year and a half. I see a lot of the young men, they watch Matt Walsh, they watch this other stuff, and they say, well, yeah, I just don't really care about Israel that much. I care about America. And I saw Matt Walsh say that on Tucker. He said, and you could tell that it is like a rhetorical innovation, because let's be honest, this is an issue that people like Matt Walsh don't want to talk about because he works for Ben Shapiro, and he knows, like Candace Owens, if you drift too far in that subject, you lose your job. And he likes having a job. So you get it. Now, this is an extremely contentious issue also, and it's very topical. It's in the news, and he knows the question's coming. Are you pro-Israel? Are you anti-Israel? There's people who feel very strongly about it. And you could tell this is like a rhetorical...
It's the safe answer.
...device. It's a cop-out where you can say, I'm not pro-Israel, but I'm not anti-Israel. I just don't care. And that really pissed me off, because it seems like you're feigning ignorance. You're either lying or you're really ignorant. And the reason why is because, be that as it may, that you don't care about Israel, we happen to be supporting their war, and it's actually hurting us. And there's other things too. Obviously, it's a big subject. There's a lot of this stuff going on. And so people say, well, let them kill each other. If you've been paying attention, one side's doing a lot more killing. Yeah. We're paying for it. We are, on the hook for all of it. And, so when they say, well, all that stuff, we don't care about it, whatever, be that as it may, it is going on. And until it stops or changes, we can't stop talking about it. It's like you said, we don't want to be obsessed with it, but if you talk about it, you get canceled. We have to talk about getting canceled. We have to talk about the thing in itself. And when that changes, similar on the same vein, people like Matt Walsh say, well, we should just end all foreign aid. It's like, okay, but they get like all of it. And it's not ending anytime soon. So you could sit there with your arms folded and say, well, I think we should end the foreign aid, but like, it's not really a big issue. Well, then you're in favor of the status quo. And that's kind of the whole point, is like, even if you're recusing yourself or you're complacent, if you're doing anything other than actively opposing, you're passively supporting the ongoing status quo, and that needs to be said.
Right, and it just seems like, as you said, there's a price tag to be paid for opposing Israel, and you don't wish to pay that price. And I'm like, okay, I understand that, but your entire worldview, even down to the non-interventionist, clearly says you have to oppose this, but you don't want to pay the price, and so you'll just go like, oh, you guys are obsessed. You guys are obsessed with this issue. It's like, well, it's a pretty relevant issue.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and it's a disaster for the Trump base.
Right.
I mean, it's like just politically, it's a disaster for the Democrats also. It's a huge part of the reason why they lost in 2024, and not just because their base was so against the thing, but because it sucked all the energy out of the room that they needed to be in opposition of Trump. They needed young people to be their shock troops like they were in 2016 and 2020. And all those young people were protesting a genocide.
Right.
And they just weren't going to turn around and be outraged by Tony Hinchcliffe, doing a routine at Madison Square Garden after that. It's just impossible. So it was devastating to them, but they're still going to support Israel no matter what. And now Donald Trump, they say, oh, look, they're destroying the Trump coalition. And it's like, well, we're kind of not budging on this one.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to say. Like, this is not, it's not just, first of all, just for moral reasons. Like, I'm not budging on an issue of genocide. I'm not doing that. But on top of that, just for sovereignty reasons, for the obvious, look, at the very least, even if you don't go nearly as far as me, let alone as far as you, Benjamin Netanyahu is a neocon at the very least, right? Like at the very least, he's a guy who testified before Congress advocating we fight the war in Iraq, in Libya, and advocates we fight a regime change war in Iran. If a guy with that track record was appointed as Secretary of State or as the Defense Secretary, every non-interventionist has to be against that guy. So how can you can't be for him? Like, it's just, and I do think that, I think there's like, they don't want to pay the price of being an Israel critic, but I think there's a new price that's going to come from not, taking a stand on this at all.
I totally agree. And I have kind of made that my mission. People hate the Groypers because the Groypers swarm on the internet. And
they sure do. They sure do, those bastards.
Even among my good friends who happen to be Jewish, they swarm and they make people upset. And they're applying pressure. And that was something that I did very intentionally in 22. I did my AFPAC 3 conference. We invited Joe Kent, who was running for Congress, and he was America First. He's from the intel community, anti-war. I think his wife tragically was killed in Syria. And by all appearances, seemed to be a good faith critic of the war machine. We invited him to our conference. He didn't show up. And then the next day, even though he wasn't even there, he disavowed me and said, I disavow Nick Fuentes. That's not populism. He said, particularly his views on Israel. And I said, see, that's the problem, because, and this is going on to this day, whether it's Kent, Trump, Biden, Charlie Kirk, if you go against Israel, they make you pay a heavy price. AIPAC is coming in with the berserkers. The ADL's coming in like, you're going to pay. So what do? Hey, I got to get them off my back. I got to disavow you. I have to sign the letter. It's easier. It's the path of least resistance. I said, we have to create an opposing force and push in the other direction. We need people to know that if you go too in favor of Israel or condemn the Israel critical right, you're going to pay a heavy price too. You're going to get, and we don't have money power, but we got people power. You're going to have somebody in your district asking you about Israel at every stop. You're going to have stickers put up. We're going to make a website. We're going to do this. He lost by 2,000 votes. He lost by like less than 1%. Biggest upset in the midterms. Now, maybe that was us. Maybe it wasn't, but you can't know for sure. Now, looking back, would he have made the same remark? Maybe not, because he says it wasn't worth it. And I'm a big believer in, we got to get serious. And this was the idea behind Groyper War 2. This was the idea behind the, what do they call them in Michigan in the Democratic primary? They voted like no preference.
Yeah.
We need to make it visible and known, like, AIPAC has the money, we have the votes. And like you said, we can't budge on that.
Okay, so here's where I would slightly disagree with you. Although I get your point. I certainly get the point about like making, there has to be a price tag also for this. But to be completely fair here, you also have painted yourself into this position where you've and look, I'm not like being judgment. First of all, as I said, this is something I think just as a society we're going to have to figure out going forward. Now that everybody's online all the time, people can't be ruined over what they said in their fucking 20s. It's just too crazy. It's too crazy. Everybody says, like, whatever. Anyone interesting has said crazy shit in their fucking 20s. That being said, it's not disavowing you. It's not just the anti-Israel shit. There's also all the Nazi shit on top of it. And I don't mean like you're a Nazi. I mean, okay, a lot of it might be sarcasm. A lot of it is that you kind of are the best at channeling, like, the energy of like talking shit on an Xbox controller. So like when I was a kid, we didn't have those, you didn't talk on video games, but we talked shit like that. Like I know that energy and I'm fond of it, but I could see where like anybody who's got to get anywhere in politics is like, listen, I have to, like, I can't take all that baggage. So in other words, there is a difference between, say, disavowing just the anti-Israel position and disavowing like all the extra shit on top of that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I get what you mean, but in that particular case, he went out of his way. Like he wasn't even associated with me. You know, we did happen to be talking privately, but it wasn't known. And my point is that it's this idea that disavowing is cheap. It's the path of least resistance. And maybe that might be a bad example. This is a little contentious. You're right. But to signal allegiance to Israel, it's easier to signal my allegiance because he said in particular, I disavow Nick Fuentes and his views on Israel. If he said he's too extreme, he's a Hitler lover, that would have been one thing. Because like you said, no politician can be forced to accept baggage like that, trying to win in a purple district.
Right.
But said his views on Israel, an alarm bell went up and I said, no, this won't do. And in particular, the Matt Walsh faction, I'm sure he's a good guy. I don't hate him as a guy. He's Catholic. He's white. He's very conservative. I'm sure he's a nice guy. But he represents a faction of like quietists where they're going to go with the Israel-controlled right to get where they need to go. And I think that's part, name of the show, it's part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem. There needs to be a faction, sadly, that is dedicated to strictly, explicitly America first. Because like you said, I mean, what even motivated me is that tension where Trump said, no, the new doctrine's America first, not small government conservatism, it's this. And I said, yeah, but there's one glaring exception to that, it seems. And they're trying to tell us, well, forget about it. Except that's the most important exception. That's the exception that proves the rule. So that's why I'm very insistent and militant on the right wing that people kind of make it known where they stand because it's a betrayal.
Well, I do as well. I agree with that. I mean, I think that there's got to be some type of pressure because otherwise, it's all going in the other direction, And I agree with you, and I try my best. There's like even when I said with Jordan Peterson, like I think Matt Walsh is as silly as it is. I thought the "what is a woman" thing was really important. It was like it did a lot of good for the culture. And so you try to give those people credit, but at the same time, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a very big issue of national sovereignty and American interests. And you're right. He's quite willing to go along with it. But all the stuff that I'm talking about and how involved Israel was, I was talking about, before that. Like Joe's a friend of mine. He's been having me on since 2016. I don't think he had me on because I was Jewish.
No, not that he brought you on like, hey, I need to invite a Jewish person. But it's like, let's be honest, you did the whole circuit. You did Tucker, Candace, Piers. I think you were on Tim Pool.
Oh,
Joe.
yeah.
These are all shows I was banned from. And you got to look at it from my perspective, maybe to see my state of mind.
Sure.
Last year when Candace got kicked out of Daily Wire, her live chat was lit up every day. Bring on Nick, bring on Nick, and she was deliberately ignoring that and didn't want me on. Now, I was banned on YouTube, but I'm also more extreme. Now, same is true of like Tucker, all the Tim Pool. People have been trying to get me on his book.
No, I've seen it. Yeah.
Right. And so, and why am I not allowed on? Of course, it's my view that I was canceled for this issue. And so to see you go onto the show, and people say it's jealousy. Maybe there's a little resentment there too, but it was a bigger concern that as a Jewish person, and also, by the way, not just that you're Jewish, but as a libertarian, you come at it from a different place. You're a non-interventionist, a Ron Paul guy. And I even have this disagreement with Tucker on some level, too. So it's not just you. my big worry is the conversation going to stop at, we need to end all these wars and like the neocons are the problem? Because my critique goes further, and it says that it actually does have to do with Jewish identity. Jewish identity is so powerful and so potent. Jews refuse to assimilate. They're so powerful. They're so tribalistic. They're loyal to each other. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is actually where the Israel loyalty proceeds from. It's this anxiety. We need Israel because what happens if it goes south here? We need to be powerful in America to prevent a majority from rising up against us. And it's kind of that identity issue, which, and you know, that's why I'm open to talking to you or even somebody like a Bill Ackman or a Sean McGuire or a Shapiro and say, I recognize Jews are a part of America. They always have been, and they're some of the finest Americans actually. But people recognize it cannot go on this way where we have an open society, but they have this loyalty and kind of play by a different set of rules. And anyway, so my concern is that what it looked like to me is you're being brought onto the shows and they know maybe that you'll never go that far as a Jewish person, or maybe even as a libertarian. And a big red line was being drawn and saying, but you are still an anti-Semite. You are still banned on YouTube. You are banned on the shows. Fuck you. You're all the way over here. And that's why I like you and I respect you and I think you're brilliant. And I didn't mean to attack you as a guy, although maybe I crossed the line here and there, but you did become a very central, and you recognize it, influential figure in this big conversation. And I looked at you maybe as like, whether you intended to or not, as a mediating force or a mitigating force in the conversation. That's where I came at it from.
Okay, so a couple things on that, because there's a lot there that's very interesting. So first of all, and I just tell you some information on this, right? So with Rogan, like, we're good friends. I've also been on the show a bunch of times. About half the time I've been on, he asks me to come on. About the other half, I ask to come on. I asked to come on the first time to talk about Israel. The last time I'd been on, it was all about Ukraine and all about, like whatever else the story of the day was. Mm-hmm. And he had a couple pro-Israel guys on, and I was just like, hey, Joe, can I come on and like break this shit down? Because I like know a lot about this. So I think it'll be an interesting fact. And he had me, and then, so it's just, with Rogan, it's just not true that there was any, with Tucker, me and Tucker became friends from, he reached out to me, got my number from Greg Gutfeld, I believe. And he reached out to me after I had been on and did a thing breaking down the war in Ukraine. And he goes, dude, I think this is the best concise breakdown of the war in Ukraine ever. And then we just started texting regularly. And he never had me on the Fox News show, but as soon as he was off, he wanted to talk. But again, if you go back and look at the Tucker thing, at least back then, like, because this was earlier in the, in the conflict, whatever you want to call it, I was the one who was bringing it up constantly. Mm-hmm. Like, he was dancing a little bit. Like, I think he was still at the thing like, I don't know if I want to go this close to the sun on this one. Whereas I was like, no, we are driving right to the sun, and that's where we're going. Candace, I mean, like, again, we're getting into like what's in people's heads. Mm. She had me on Daily Wire, which, listen, whatever beef I will never stop being grateful to Candace Owens for just having me on at the Daily Wire. I just know that made Ben Shapiro so furious, and I love that so much. I think she did that partially for that reason. But she also, at least what she said was she loved my Ukraine breakdown and wanted to talk more about that. And I think also part of that was, and I'm pretty sure this is right, but I just think she was hearing a lot of this stuff for the first time from me. Like, she had just broken with Israel. And I think she had Norman Finkelstein on, but he had broken down like, the conflict with the Palestinians and the UN resolutions and stuff like that. But I was the one telling her about the clean break strategy and all this. And it was like new information to her, I believe. And so she was into that. And as far as like the other shows, Tim Pool, all the, like, I don't actually think it's correct that I was being brought on because I was Jewish. These were all relationships I had. I think I just wouldn't shut up about this issue. And honest, I don't think Tim Pool's trying to bring me on to talk about this, although not that he wouldn't.
Right.
But also, I would just say personally, which is, again, not the most important thing, but I understand you saying there's a lot of people that closed the door on you, but I'm not that guy. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy who had you on right after you got kicked off YouTube. And right. I also think like I was, anyway, that was certainly not what I was going to do. Now, as far as the other stuff, which is a more interesting, broader conversation, I guess the counter to this would be that, as we were saying before with the racial like racial hatred and things like that. It's like the other way to look at it is that, yes, I am criticizing Israel. I am criticizing the Israeli lobby, and I am criticizing the most, what I see as the most relevant faction of that, which was the neoconservatives. And I'm also very critical of the people supporting what Israel's doing. But you are correct in the sense that I'm not saying it's the Jews, which does certainly seem to be, you know, like, I mean, racialism is like catnip, man. Like, it's like you saw it during wokeism and you see it during this iteration. I mean, people love going into that. But if I'm being completely honest, like, look, and I want to get into this more, but like, yeah, there are questions of Jewish identity. There are questions. Obviously, there's a relationship there. But the fact is that, say, look, the worst thing in my lifetime that Israel's done to the United States of America, I'm not sold on the 9/11 stuff. There's some questions there, but I think it's far from as conclusive. I think people are way out over their skis saying they know for a fact Israel did 9/11, but that's a topic for another day. But it was the war in Iraq. The war in Iraq is no question, and Coleman Hughes can try to argue with me about this, there's just no question that the neoconservatives and the Likud party and the whole Bush administration, this was pushed in a direction. It's not the only factor, but it is more than what made the difference. Like, the war does not happen without the neocons and without Netanyahu. It just doesn't. And yet, at the same time, Jewish Americans were either the best or one of the best groups on that issue. Jews opposed the war in Iraq way ahead of the general public. And like right-wing Christians were like the worst group on that. And so, but again, my target isn't them. My target isn't the people.
Right.
My target is like the people who propagandized them into believing that. And so if the thing is like, hey, I stopped short at like actually naming the Jews, it's like, well, yeah, because I don't think that's right. And I don't like, yes, there, and we can get into more of this, but like, no, like Barry the dentist has nothing to do with any of this. And he, I think on some level, maybe I'm wrong, but I also don't think you're really trying to gin up hatred toward that guy. And so maybe that's why I stopped short of blaming the Jews. I think it's sloppier and not as accurate.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think it's important just on a basic level to say that we don't agree on everything. Like, we are distinct, and I wouldn't even say it's about further or closer. It's just that we are coming at it from different places. You believe it's the neocons, and it's in particular the war party and Israel and how those interact. And me, as an identitarian, I do look at the world through an identity-based lens, that you've got whites, blacks, Jews, and they all have political interest. They all identify as these groups. They group up based on them, and then those groups have conflicting interests. That's what politics has become, is like meeting out those interests. Like, is it in the interest of white people to go to war in Iraq? No, but for Jews, yes, because they have this connection to Israel. And same about all these other things. And so, even getting back to our beef, we could quibble about, I don't think there's some conspiracy. I don't think they got together and said, let's invite Dave because, he's going to, like, maintain censorship and Jewish control. Like, I don't believe that. But I do believe that you clearly take the more moderate position, or even, I would say, the more liberal position. As a libertarian, you're like a lowercase l liberal in the sense that you think that it's, like you said, it's not Jews in themselves or Jewish identity in itself. It is particular people in power, in particularly the state, that are doing these violent policies, whereas me, it is maybe a more radical rejection of liberalism. And I think that, maybe you're informed by your Jewish identity, or you're just ideologically believe that. It is a more moderate position, and they platform that because that's the version they want. That's the version that is safer for a Tim Pool or whoever. That's the version that the system is maybe comfortable with. That's what they might be willing to accept. And they don't want to take it to the place of the Jews for the reason, maybe for the good reason you described. And by the way, I'll give you another concession because I want to be objective. There are people that are legitimately hating Jews right now.
There are.
I saw in Florida, they're pulling up on Jews with like water pistols and spraying them with water. And I got on my show and I said, fuck that.
Yeah,
I said,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I don't believe in that. I'm not a piece of shit. If I saw Ben Shapiro on the street, I saw him on the street and I said, hey man, why did you do a speech? You need to say my name. I didn't run up and try and fight him.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in
They
attacking.
made it out like you did.
Yeah, right. Like I attacked his kids or something.
Yeah.
Human shields, right? But he picked up his kid when he walked across the street. It's like, okay, bro. But you know, like I don't believe in picking on random people. I'm not a cruel or hateful guy. And you do see that. And that video bothered me in particular because if people start to think it's okay to do that, you know, the ADL isn't necessarily wrong about the idea that it is slippery slope. You know, you pull up on somebody with a water pistol. Okay, what if it's a paintball gun next time? Is that really okay? That people are going to be harassed and like shot at with a airsoft gun or a paintball gun? No, that's bullshit. And that's denying basic dignity, basic rights. That's not Christian. That's not American. And there is an excess of that. And I agree that it should be sort of contained. But I think there's a fine line between that and saying that it is a bigger issue than the neocons because, you know, when it comes to these influential Jews, like Larry Ellison, let's say, he's not religious, but he's tight with Netanyahu. Jeffrey Epstein was tight with the left in Israel. And to the extent that, you're right, Jews were the biggest critics of the Iraq war, in many cases, yeah, there's liberal Jews, but they're liberal because that's a strategy for Jews to succeed. They have these debates. What is best for the Jews? And like Brett Stevens at the New York Times, he mentored Bari Weiss. He says, Trump,
Oh, God, I hate him so much.
And he sucks, you know. He's a neocon, case in point.
Yeah, I got in a big fight with him on Gutfeld's show years ago. He was such a smarmy prick. Anyway, whatever. But
major
yeah,
douche.
oh, God, it's the worst, the worst.
Yeah, but he says in 16 or 17, he goes, Trump is bad for the Jews because he is opposing the liberal values that have been so good to us as Jews. And it's like that sort of encapsulates when, like the ADL, for example, gets criticized. They say, well, the ADL's making Jews look bad. Or they're going after people like Shapiro and protecting people like Ilhan Omar. In other words, they're attacking Jewish Zionists, but they're not hard enough on the progressive left. And what I see there is still a distilled Jewish self-interest, which is okay because we're all people and we're all advocating for the most for ourselves. But in America, we just need to do a better job of managing that. And I think that the Jewish community's out of control.
So guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Leave a like if you want to. Christ is King, and God bless you.